The audacity of such an action did not go unnoticed by her. Even the servants who had once worked for her own family had exercised more restraint. Was this not considered rude behavior? Should she not be offended? The choice to be angry was not something she could even decide for herself in this place. Before she could dwell too long on the matter, a familiar notification appeared before her eyes. 3 options were presented to her, each carrying its own consequences. The first suggested that she throw something at him in retaliation. The second instructed her to call him forward and demand that he enter properly. The third simply allowed her to accept the situation as it was. After considering her options, she concluded that the third was the safest course of action. With a quiet resignation, the decision was made. A thought surfaced in her mind: perhaps, in some way, this had worked out for the best. Fortune appeared to favor her at this moment, as it seemed that the Duke had been seeking her presence. If she handled the situation correctly, she might be able to take advantage of this unexpected opportunity. A similar situation had unfolded in her previous life. The memory was as vivid as ever. She had once approached her father with an acceptance letter in hand, eager to share her accomplishment. She had expected, if not warmth, then at least some form of acknowledgement. Instead, she had been met with indifference. A single glance had been cast at the letter before a question had been asked, a question that carried no trace of interest or approval. It had been implied that there must have been another reason for her visit. That response had devastated her. The letter had not simply been a statement of achievement, it had been a plea, an unspoken request for validation. Summoning her courage, she had then asked for permission to move out, expressing her wish to live near the university while attending school. It had not been an unreasonable request. The answer she had received had been brief and devoid of emotion. Permission had been granted, and she had been told to make the necessary preparations. The memory had only strengthened her resolve. Her acceptance into a prestigious university had never been about gaining her family's approval. The efforts she had put into her studies had never been meant to earn their recognition. Everything had been done for one reason alone: to escape. To long for love from those who had treated her worse than a pet had been a mistake she would not make again. Now, standing outside the Duke's office in this unfamiliar world, she was reminded once more of that same suffocating feeling. The weight of judgment pressed upon her as the maids in the hallway exchanged hushed whispers. Their glances were not unfamiliar to her. In her past life, similar looks had been directed at her, though their meaning had always remained unspoken. The butler, having led her to the room, formally announced her arrival. The Duke was informed that Lady Penelope had been brought before him, and in response, permission for her entry was granted. The heavy doors opened, revealing the figure of the Duke seated at the table. The sight of him in that position caused a sudden realization to strike her: this scene was eerily reminiscent of the life she had left behind. Her father had always occupied his seat at the head of the table in the exact same manner, his presence radiating a cold authority that had once been inescapable. Once again, the system presented her with 3 possible responses. The first prompted her to question the Duke's reason for summoning her. The second suggested that she demand he get straight to the point. The third encouraged her to remain silent and simply observe him. After careful consideration, she selected the first option. A question was directed toward the Duke regarding the reason for this summons. In response, he addressed the matter that had occurred earlier in the morning, stating that he had been informed of a disturbance. 3 new choices appeared before her. The first assured the Duke that there was no need for concern. The second implied that trouble had been something he had been expecting. The third placed the blame entirely on the actions of an incompetent maid. None of the choices were ideal. She found herself once again frustrated by the system's limitations. It was no wonder that Penelope, as a character, had been so disliked. Who would look favorably upon an adopted daughter who lacked both grace and tact? A fleeting thought crossed her mind: why had she ever chosen the second option when playing this game before? Perhaps, had Penelope's features resembled those of the Duke's true daughters, there might have been hope for even the smallest thread of compassion from him. But as things stood, such hope was meaningless. What mattered now was survival. Every choice carried consequences, and she needed to navigate this conversation without stepping into dangerous territory. After a moment of hesitation, she selected the safest response. She assured the Duke that the matter was not significant enough to warrant his concern. His expression remained unchanged as he addressed her once more. A reminder was given. It had been 6 years since she had entered the Eckhart household. The realization struck her. 6 years. That was correct. The heroine of the game was also 18, which meant. Her thoughts raced. The coming-of-age ceremonies in this world were held on one's 18th birthday. The question that now loomed over her was a crucial one: how much time remained before the Duke's real daughter returned? The Duke continued speaking, explaining that entry into the Eckhart household was not a simple matter. Those who had been allowed through its doors had only done so after proving their worth through rigorous testing. Since adopting her, he had not withheld resources nor denied any of her extravagant requests. However, he remained unconvinced of what worth she had demonstrated over the past 6 years. Once again, the system presented 3 choices. The first implied that she expected to be cast out. The second asserted that she had done nothing wrong. The third instructed her to kneel and accept responsibility while addressing him as Father. The sight of the third option caused a sense of understanding to settle within her. She recalled her first experience playing this game. The sheer number of features and choices had felt overwhelming at the time. Had games truly evolved into such complex systems? And had she really needed to activate these functions to progress? Now, however, no such uncertainty plagued her. Without hesitation, she followed the prompt, lowering herself onto her knees and offering an apology. She took responsibility and addressed the Duke with the title that had long been unfamiliar to her. A visible reaction flickered across his face. Surprise was evident as the words were repeated back to her. The name she had spoken, the one she had been instructed to use, was acknowledged. At that moment, a system notification appeared before her. Hidden quest achieved, Father, the forgotten name. Another prompt followed immediately after. Would you like to disable multiple choice answers? The message lingered before her, awaiting a decision. It was further stated that without the predefined responses, she would have complete control over her actions and words, enabling a more in-depth and unrestricted experience. Additionally, fulfilling certain special conditions would lead to the unlocking of exclusive events. The implications of this decision were weighed carefully in her mind. In her real life, this function had been disregarded, as it had seemed unnecessary at the time. However, given the circumstances she now found herself in, the value of this feature was recognized. If her assumptions were correct, then disabling the multiple-choice answers would be crucial for ensuring her survival in this unpredictable world. Without hesitation, the option was selected, and at that moment, the restrictive guidance that had previously dictated her responses disappeared. A newfound sense of control washed over her. For the first time, words were spoken freely, without being dictated by the system's predetermined choices. When she addressed the Duke as her father, visible shock was seen in his expression. It was immediately understood that the change had worked. Now, movements and speech could be made without being bound by external commands. A realization struck her: something as simple as the ability to speak of her own volition had never been appreciated before, and yet, now it felt like an immense privilege. With this new freedom, a composed yet humble tone was adopted while speaking to the Duke. Acknowledgement was made of the trouble she had caused during her probation, and an apology was extended for the scandal that had arisen due to improper conduct with a subordinate. A promise was made that deep reflection would be undertaken throughout the remaining period of her probation. Although the morning's events had not been her fault, arguing that point seemed both unnecessary and detrimental. The reality of the situation was understood. Penelope had been the victim, yet taking a defensive stance would not be in her best interest. Considering the behavior associated with her character until now, any sign of stubbornness would only serve to harm her further. A realization dawned upon her that in this world, survival depended on demonstrating humility, even when it was undeserved. Continuing with her plea, an admission was made regarding the childish and arrogant behavior she had exhibited over the years. A sincere promise was voiced, that efforts would be made to prove her worth until her coming-of-age ceremony. A request was then placed before the Duke, seeking forgiveness for this one mistake. A long silence filled the room before a response was finally given. In a measured tone, the Duke instructed her to rise from the floor. A warning was then issued, stating that an Eckhart's words were never to be taken lightly, and it was advised that the opportunity earned that day should not be wasted. With a composed demeanor, appreciation was expressed for his words before she turned away and carefully exited the room. As the heavy doors were shut behind her, a deep breath was taken. Relief coursed through her veins as the weight of the encounter settled in her mind. Somehow, she had managed to navigate through the situation without worsening her circumstances. Uncertainty lingered about whether the decision made had been the best one, but at the very least, it had been enough for now. The thought was entertained that the Duke was not someone whose favor needed to be sought. The only thing that mattered was that she had emerged from the room alive. However, before the relief could fully take hold, a cold and disapproving voice reached her ears. A statement was made, reminding her of the strict instruction that had been given. She had been told to remain quiet and unseen, as if she did not exist. The words were spoken with an unmistakable edge of disdain. Upon turning, the sight of Derek Eckhart greeted her. His unreadable gaze held an unmistakable intensity, and displeasure radiated from his stance. Without hesitation, a direct remark was made regarding the fate of Emily, a maid who had served the household with unwavering loyalty for nearly 10 years. It was revealed that she had been expelled from the palace, and the blame was placed entirely on Penelope. The discontent in Derek's voice left no room for doubt. His anger was deeply rooted in the dismissal of the maid, an action that he seemed to hold against her. Her gaze briefly flickered to the love meter hovering above him. A grim realization set in, it had already plummeted to 0%. With barely concealed frustration, he continued to express his disdain. It was conveyed that despite offers of increased pay, no one had been willing to serve as her lady's maid. Emily had been the only one willing to tolerate her, the only one who had made any effort to maintain peace in her presence. And yet, even that had come to an end that day. A pointed question was then thrown at her: was she satisfied now that she had caused such an uproar and driven away the only maid who had shown her even a shred of loyalty? Internally, a surge of exasperation rose within her. The accusation was unfair. In truth, she had never been the one to cause an uproar. It had been her brother who had escalated the situation unnecessarily. She had been the one placed in danger, nearly losing her life over a simple meal that had turned out to be tainted. However, voicing these thoughts would only be futile. At that moment, another system notification appeared before her. 3 response options were presented, each likely to dictate the course of her next interaction. Without hesitation, the multiple choice options were once again disabled, allowing her to take control of her words. A brief pause settled between them before Derek made another statement, this time with a sharper tone. It was demanded whether she now believed that his words were not worthy of a response. In a carefully measured voice, a respectful apology was extended. The words chosen were deliberate, acknowledging the trouble caused while maintaining an air of humility. He had been addressed formally as, "My lord," a decision that took him by complete surprise. A flicker of disbelief was briefly visible in his expression before it was masked once more. While maintaining a composed exterior, frustration boiled within her. How many more times would she be expected to lower her head for crimes she had not committed? A flood of memories from her childhood surfaced. In her past life, blame had always been assigned to her without reason. Regardless of innocence, accusations had been thrown at her, and nothing she had done had ever been enough to prove otherwise. With that painful recollection in mind, further words were spoken. Agreement was given to Derek's accusations, an admission was made that, as he had pointed out, she had failed to recognize her place. Responsibility was taken for not conducting herself properly, and acknowledgement was given that the blame lay with her. However, it was suggested that the maid did not need to be cast aside. The fact that the Duke's forgiveness had already been sought was then stated. A final assurance was given, that from this moment forward, no actions would be taken that might attract Derek's attention. A request for forgiveness was made once more, with the assurance that if necessary, she would continue to beg as much as he desired. Yet, even as the words left her lips, bitterness filled her heart. Her pride still existed. Lowering herself in such a way felt degrading, humiliating. But she reminded herself that it was a necessary act for survival. And just like before, she would do it again. As Penelope's words hung in the air, the tension between her and Derek remained thick, his expression unreadable yet filled with something dangerously close to contempt. Would her carefully chosen humility be enough to pacify him, or had she only managed to deepen his resentment? And as she struggled to maintain her composure, unaware of what awaited her next, had she truly secured her safety, or merely stepped into an even greater storm? Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.